creators of social media or news networks are going to behavior lab to make it more addictive for us, then we also, as parents, we should go to those labs in terms of like reading books of the scientists who work there and try to do the same to address the same issue, behavioral issue on ourselves and on our kids. This is how we can actually take control back.
Welcome back to Raising Game Changers podcast. This is Zach's story, my beautiful wife.
NatalyaStory.
And today we'd like to talk to you about unboxing yourself and your kids. Quite an interesting topic, babe. Thanks for bringing that up to my attention. Love to talk about it.
Yeah.
So let's start. Where do we start about unboxing?
With the box, I guess. The interesting story, the origin story of the phrase thinking outside the box
Mm-hmm.
it actually came from 70s or 80s in the management consulting firms when the puzzle was given to managers. It's basically 9 dots, like this one.
Oh, is that the exercise where you have to connect the dots with one line?
And now it's one line. Before it used to be 4 straight lines.
Oh, and the solution is you have to go outside of the box,
And
right?
most of the people, they struggling because they trying to stay inside this box. And that's how the phrase thinking outside the box actually came in our everyday life.
Wow.
You have to go outside in order to connect it the way.
That's
it's
fascinating. I never knew the origins of that.
Me either. I just looked at it.
Yeah.
And that's basically the key to unboxing yourself or your child, because we limit our thinking inside the like rules and norms, society norms, school rules and all of that inside the box, and then it's very hard to get out. And I don't think anything like great can be created inside one box. But if you'll take a look at our everyday life, it's like, as you said today, everything is box.
Oh, it's not me who said that. I think it was Tony Robbins who said that. We live in boxes. You know, from your cubicle, you're in the box, or in your office, you're in the box. You get in the car, it's usually box shape. You talk on the phone, it's box. You come home, and what do? You watch the box. you have food that gets delivered to you in boxes. Like, we live, a life of boxes. Actually, when you mentioned that you want to talk about this topic, that's what I thought you want to talk about. But I know it's something else. I thought you're talking about like Tony Robbins' take on life and that we live in boxes. That's what my initial take was. Like, oh, she was talking
No,
about
I'm
that.
actually listening the book Unbox Your Life right now. And it's such an interesting book, the way it's written, the way it's spoken. It's
Written in spoken language, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it made me think like it's true that we create our own limitations, and it creates a box that we live in every single day, and then we struggle because we can't come out of that box.
Psychokybernetics all over again. It's cyberkybernetics.
And then we project the same problem to our kids by creating different type of rules and regulations.
Passing our limiting beliefs onto them.
Yeah.
Without even realizing it, and sometimes realizing it, but can't help yourself even, or like you catch yourself later. But the damage already kind of been done. You also have to know how to undo the damage that you do. That's a science in itself. There are things that we can do in order to actually unbox our kids out of their way of thinking, out of realizing these fears that were set in them. One of the core exercises that helped me, for instance, unbox myself is the ones that I learned from Tim Ferriss. That's the one that Tim actually credits to like saving his life, and that's the fear setting exercise that he learned from the Stoics, where you literally just like take a piece of paper and you write down. And I know me and you don't like that approach in terms of like, oh, that's a scarcity mindset, but it's also a mindset of like realizing I didn't finish what he does. He writes down like what's the worst that can happen. When you write that down, you realize it's not that bad, not nearly as bad as your mind makes it out to be. When you write things down like what's the worst possible thing that will happen, whatever you're fearful of, you realize it's not that dangerous, it's not that, and nothing to be afraid of, and you're going to get over it just like many other people got over it, and you even know exactly how you will do it. So it's just the unknown by default scares you more than when you write it out and you realize, oh, this is not as dangerous as I think it is. So fear setting is an exercise brought to us by Stoics. I learned from Tim Ferriss. He had a tech talk about that. And it's very powerful. It's very powerful. Except I know that it kind of brings about thinking about the worst case scenarios. And we want to live in the abundance mindset. And if we're taking an approach about from like Dr. Joe Dispenza's approach of synchronicity in the world and abundance, that's not a very healthy way. But I think maybe for those who have that already built in is an exercise to get out.
Yeah, maybe. Because you also need to be able to escape that box somehow.
Yeah.
And it's also like interesting you're talking about fears, and I think fear is the most useful tool for controlling or putting people in boxes, especially like coming from New York City, where like basically everything is in boxing. I mean, every single apartment is a box, right?
Yeah, but not every. Come on.
Some are bigger, some are smaller. And the fear control is like to put people back inside the boxes is just mind-boggling to me. Like a couple days ago, New York City prepares for nuclear attack, and it was like and trying to scare people more and more to put them inside the boxes. And that's exactly what we need to, first of all, see, because without realizing what media or news trying to do, we can see it clearly, right? And then if we're fearful, then we'll project that fear on our kids, for sure.
And we have to explain to our kids. I think anybody who actually wants to understand how the media apparatus works in a global scheme, there's a phenomenal book. It should be an all-time classic by now. It's called Manufacturing Consent. I think it was written by Noel Chomsky back in, I don't know, 80s or something, or 70s. I have to look it up, actually. I'll look it up right now.
Do we have that book?
I listened to it and I read it on Kindle. We don't have a physical copy. But it very well explains how the powers that be, they control and they keep control through, dividing and conquering of the mental states and through manufacturing consent. And it was obvious. Recently, it was, easy to see that. Before, you had to be a little bit paying close attention to the cycles to see that. Now it's just blatant in your face. When Joe Rogan mentioned, I'm not even mentioning that drug by name because I'm not sure how YouTube was going to rank this podcast for it, so I'm not going to mention, but we know exactly what we're talking about, right? When Joe Rogan mentioned that, and then you saw that across all media channels, how skewed the perception was right away. Like, that's it. They just went at him, portrayed him as this evil, stupid guy, which in reality, but everything he was voicing was very legit. In terms of that, if there is a drug that's available in the market today that could potentially have any kind of positive influence on the outcome, then you can get that emergency approval for, right? So, bam, right there. And then he was made an evil out to be because he brought that very reasonable thing into light, that we need to investigate other things that maybe have certain potential. And then the fact that, like, how it was all across all channels, and then, boom, it goes, it goes and goes and goes. And then the kids get brainwashed by their parents because their parents are very well brainwashed and so on and so forth. And it's I don't think it's anything new, though, to be honest with you. I think throughout the entirety of history and times, most of the people are gullible, lack ability to think critically, and very few, far in between, actually read between the lines. And today, I think it's more than ever, percentage-wise, even though people don't think that.
I think right now is much easier to manipulate with all the social media. For example, all the creators like Facebook, Instagram, they all go to Stanford Behavior Lab to analyze how would make anything more addictive for humans, right? The same lab that BJ Fogg works.
I understand, but...
So if the creators of social media or news networks are going to Behavior Lab to create and to make it more addictive for us, then we also, as parents, we should go to those labs in terms of like reading books of the scientists who work there and try to do the same, like to address the same issue, behavioral issue on ourselves and on our kids. So this is how we can actually take control back.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That information is also available to us now.
Yep.
And we can leverage that knowledge and utilize it, which before it was not. See, the thing is, like before, that knowledge was still available to the big boys, but not really to us. I couldn't get access to the best, brightest minds in the world. They didn't publish books as often as they do today. They don't have podcasts like they do today. How before would I be able to learn from guys like Dr. Peter Attia, from Andrew Huberman, from Dr. Carol Dweck, all at the same time in the same year?
No, they do publish papers, and unless you understand the language, the very complex neuroscientific language, then it's hard to understand. I agree.
But a 3-hour podcast, on Rogan's or Lex Friedman's actually breaks things down to me. It's much easier to consume. And then when I go and get the book, and then when I read what it's about, I can be, first of all, selective. I don't need to read the whole thing. I know exactly what I need to clarify. I need to know, so it just makes it the same thing with, you mentioned BJ Fogg, right? The fact that I can listen to the man now versus, I knew of BJ Fogg back in 2007 when Fogg behavior model came out. Why? Because it was widely used in marketing and predictive analysis of human behavior at mass, So Fogg behavior model, he made him famous back in 2007. But did I have access to the man? No. Did I learn of things like Maui Habit in 2014? No. It's only when his TED Talk came out in 2014 about the Maui Habit that I discovered the power of tiny habits. And then when his book came out in 2018, completely blew the lid of how we can form habits. And right before it was right before it was also the book by James Clear, Atomic Habits. So it's just compounding on top. Like the last 7 years, from 2015 on forward, the amount of scientific data on behavior formation, behavioral psychology, neuroscience, it's amazing. It's overwhelming. And now now you have the same power they do. You can utilize that knowledge to help your kids, to protect them, and to empower them. Just the same way that the other people are trying to use that in order to get them.
Yep. And from parent perspective, for example, when there is fear, when there is a fear in the air, what can we do? We can teach them to focus on things that kids actually can control, for example, instead of being fearful about things that we can control. And there are different exercises, like thinking about what you can control. Also, like choosing in which state you want to be, like you want to be happy right now. So from that perspective, what can you do to choose to be happy? Remember, like that phrase, I always tell Skylar, like happiness is a choice. It's not given. You have to choose to be happy, and then everything else you'll do in order to get there. If the goal is to be happy, then you'll get there.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that ability to actually distinguish between what you can and cannot control, because that actually goes back centuries, if not thousands of years. I think it's called the Serenity Prayer. Comes from a long time ago, I think maybe even from the Bible, where it says that God gives me the serenity to know the difference, right, between things that I can control, cannot control, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? So the Serenity Prayer was from centuries ago that actually was preaching to distinguish between things you can control, cannot control, and stop worrying things that are out of your control. You can't help them anyway.
Yep.
And these days, especially when we're bombarded about the bad news worldwide, which, human mind is not really built that way to know everything that goes on in the world at all times. Now we have to develop that skill in our kids with a lot more vigilance. But I think it all starts with understanding, okay, first and foremost, most important thing is protecting your attention, building an attention dome around yourself, not letting these people that are trying to monetize your nervous system get to you. Also, then comes to the second layer of critical thinking, I believe, is the fact that you have to educate them on, unfortunately, ugly truths of life. But the thing is, if you start early, it's not hard for them. I think it's a lot harder for kids to realize that everybody's got their own agenda at 13 than when you tell them from 5 years old, hey, everybody's got their own agenda. If they want something for you, there's a reason for that. Nobody's doing things just because they want the best for you, right? They have, even if it's something that will benefit you, even if they'll make them feel good, that means that's why they're doing it.
It's sort of like that episode in Friends, remember?
Yeah, of course. When they were talking about selfless deeds. Yes, there's no such thing as a selfless deed, they were saying. I'm not going to go as far as to say that, because actually we teach them that helping other people is an amazing thing. You feel amazing when you do that.
But as you say, you feel amazing.
Right. It's not selfless. You're doing it to help them. At the same time, it benefits you. It's a mutual win-win. And win-win-win is what we want to go after in life. Mm-hmm. It's one of the principles from Stephen Covey's 7.5 principles of successful people, right? Is looking for the win-win all the time. This is one of those things. Helping others, you help them, and it helps you. But the point is like educating kids on critical thinking right away and actually kind of like peeling that layer of reality early, not shielding them from it. I think it makes it a lot easier for them to accept the reality later in life. Like Sky is completely, totally okay with the fact that people are vying for his attention. He understands they're trying to hijack his nervous system. He was really surprised at first when I told him this, but then he accepted it and like, all right, what can we do, Dad?
Exactly. He now knows how to deal with it versus creating a bubble, and then when it pops, you have no idea what to do with that.
There's other things you can do. I remember to this day, everybody who sees you do it for the first time is in huge shock. All our friends seen you do many times, seen me do it many times. From the very first stage when Sky was like 2.5 years old, because now I see you doing it with Luna since 2 years old. Now I'm doing it with her. Is the question, give me the 5 reasons why. Right? Anytime they want to do something, we tell them to give you 5 reasons why. When they were little, the reasons didn't have to be like very, how do I say that properly, like succinct, you know? They didn't have to be very distinct. They didn't have to be very well thought out. Just give me 5 reasons why. So Sky would just blabber something like, because I'm cute, because I want it, okay, that's fine. That all works when you're 2.5 years old. We're not requiring high level of thinking here. We're just getting you used to thinking for yourself, right? And then, as he was getting older, the requirements for the reasons elevated. It's no longer enough to say, I want it. You have to give me 5 different reasons.
But it also creates a purpose. Like you do something with a purpose in mind. You don't just waste your time or opportunity. It's sort of like from big why, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do anything with a purpose, and then it creates an opportunity.
And it not just creates an opportunity, also once you're doing things with a purpose and with a reason, I think it just teaches you to articulate things, to think them through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not just reacting to your wishes. You kind of like that exercise, give me 5 reasons why, is amazing. Because I just see how it works. I see how kids like, all right. And then they realize that as long as they can argue their case, we're going to let them do things that normally we wouldn't because it's not really healthy for them. But for us, it was more important to actually develop critical thinking than sometimes protect their health. We would let them do it. I remember that shock Sky's teacher had when we told her about this thing. And a parent-teacher conference, which was like remote, it was via Zoom. And we told her, look, if my son gives you 5 reasons why he wants to do something, unless it interferes with your protocol and class protocol, you have to let him. She was all over it. She never heard this before. She was like, wow, really? You guys do that with him? Yes. Because critical thinking is way more important long term. We got to start early.
And it also teaches how to be more proactive versus to be reactive. It's like I'm waking up in the morning, I'm taking my phone, and I'm thinking, okay, why do I need it right now? And then if I don't have those reasons for myself, why would I ever react to someone else's priority or agenda? And the same things, like teaching kids early to be more proactive about protecting themselves and also do anything with a purpose in mind. So yeah, to be more proactive versus reactive. And I don't remember whose book was that.
About proactive?
Yeah.
Stephen Covey's too.
Yeah.
It was also in 7.5 Habits of Highly Successful People. I think it was number one habit, that being proactive is number one habit of successful people. Because when you're proactive, I've learned that like right away in life, like literally, like when you put things off, like because I used to put things off, right, like everybody else till the last minute, then this pressure of knowing that it's there is kind of like bringing everything else down in your efforts throughout that week or that month, that year that you're putting off that thing. And once you just go out and be proactive about solving this thing, everything else like gets lifted easier because that weight is no longer on your shoulders. So being proactive about things is critical, I think, also. But as far as unboxing our kids from the box they're being trying to put into right now. So, like I said, I think it's a double-edged sword, but we're more empowered today than ever as parents. Like before internet, there was no way for us to be able to learn from the brightest minds of the world, whether they're scientists or whether they're speakers or scholars or philosophers or just guys like, these amazing podcasters, think Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, like guys like that. We couldn't have learned from them 20, 30 years ago.
Remember that phrase Elon likes to say, there are only laws of physics.
Yeah, physics is the only law. Everything else is just a recommendation.
Well, that kind of the idea of not boxing the kids in terms of like there are a lot of different rules, and in school, for example, kids learn how to be afraid or scared to break those rules for real.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen that. Well, we're not supposed to do that. Why not?
I know. They beat that out of kids. That spontaneity and the fact that it's okay to break a rule once in a while. Sometimes it's necessary to break rules. I actually right now Jordan Peterson has launched his new masterclass that he's teaching things under, and in the commercial to that masterclass, he's talking about specifically that thing. That when he was asked by his son about like the rules and how, like, he told him that okay, we live in a society where rules are important, and normally for the majority of the time, it's important to follow the rules, but sometimes it's important to break the rules. And the thing is, those times when it's important to break the rules are a lot more important than the times when you have to follow the rules. Something to that extent, I'm definitely going to listen to the masterclass because I'm just a big fan of Peterson. But the message is very, very clear. The times you have to break the rules are the hardest times because you're kind of being judged by everybody else. And that's the time where you have to come through and shine.
Yep.
Because it's really important. If Elon didn't break all the rules right now, he wouldn't be where he is. Literally. And it's that mentality of breaking rules that he got to where he is. He also breaks rules where he shouldn't, but that's just the price you have to pay.
Or, I mean, we also, like, as long as you don't hurt anyone, in my opinion, as long as you don't harm people around you, what kind of rules could be?
Yeah, but you know what it is? It's the control of the masses that they're trying to utilize. Fear is a great one, but what we know about fear now is that it really, really terribly affects your health, which is probably also in line with the global agenda because then, guess what? Somebody's making a lot of money off that.
It's not just that. It's, in my opinion, it's harder to control people. The population on the planet is getting much bigger. And take a look at China. Their birth rate is actually going down, but just because people live longer.
That's why they have so many more people right now.
They have so many people, yeah. And
well, I don't know. You see that a lot of people that we respect and love and think they're smarter than us, they kind of think that population collapse is the biggest threat, the real threat in the next 20, 30 years, including Elon, who talks about it all the time.
Interesting, why?
Well, they think it's because I see this right now. Look at all the brainiacs that are not having any kids, right? Look at all the people. Also, in terms of like population collapse happens also because he mentions that since the World War II and the boomers and all that longevity went up. So we just have a lot more older people right now who are about to expire. Once they expire, babe, we're going to have a lot less people on this planet all of a sudden. So I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, though. Because, Elon says the bad thing. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I'll be honest. But to me, I don't really care. Because again, I don't worry about things I can't control. I don't care about that. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I don't think about it. I don't lose sleep over this. What I do lose sleep over, I want to control is that, okay, my kid is going to live well over 100 years, possibly hundreds of years if Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis and the whole exit velocity thing is right. But we're seeing results of this now. We're seeing age reversal from guys like David Sinclair from Harvard, right? We're seeing this is real. So guaranteed they're going to live past 100 years into a happy, healthy life, given technology we already have today. And most likely, going to live hundreds of years. We don't even know what kind of possibilities to keep your conscience will be available later, giving AI opportunities, or copying your, like they're saying right now, downloading your brain and uploading it to a new body. Things of that nature can happen. So my concern is like, how do I actually make sure that when...
I'm curious, do you have a choice which body you would upload it up?
Hey, we'll find out. We'll find out when it comes to it, But I want to make sure that my kids get raised in this world because there's going to be a huge separation. I think it's already happening. And I think it's just the beginning of it, of separation of people who live life on their own terms, that dictate their own future, because guess what? Now they have the power to do so. They didn't have it before, and everybody else who was always there. But before, it was easier to be an average. Why? Because before you didn't have AI, you didn't have full automation, you didn't have that level of brainwashing that exists today. Think 100 years ago or think 200 years ago, like you would get the news from like a guy that strolls into the town square and like plasters it on a wall and just reads it. And this news is like a month or 2 months old. Like, and Imagine like how they used to even call troops up. Some guy over there said this about us. Let's go over there. And like, yeah, sure. Give me my musket. Let's go. He said what? Like 200 years ago, this was reality. So what we live today is crazy. We're very empowered. For people with critical thinking, super empowered. And I think there's more people now with critical thinking than before. It just seems that way because we're drowned out by the flood of nonsense. Like if you look at Twitter, everybody brings Twitter as an example, right? But yet the loudest idiots are on Twitter. Who cares what they have to say? You know?
But it's interesting. We also live in a time when we already can't distinguish with 100% certainty, was it a human or a bot?
Well, that's gonna change soon.
It's also
It's a pains of growth, babe. This is such a new technology. Pains of growth. The new guy is gonna use blockchain to verify your identity, or the new platform is gonna be able to do that, or they're gonna have an elevated service of the platform where only humans are allowed, but you have to pay for it. Things like that will happen very, very soon.
it's already happening. Yeah.
You know, Dan Kennedy said at the last Final Hacking Live this amazing phrase that right now, somewhere in the garage, there's two kids thinking how to beat Apple out of business. And that is healthy paranoia. You know, that's how you said it. It's very healthy paranoia. It's good to think like that because they are out there. They're thinking right now. And, that, you know, this is all going to evolve very, very soon.
For some reason, I just thought about our two kids. Are they somewhere in the garage?
They may be right now in the garage thinking how to beat Apple out of their share of business.
I'm actually now afraid to go and see what they actually do there. It's so quiet.
You know, but unboxing is really important, like, or protecting them from being boxed in, rather.
Yeah.
You know, like we need to unbox as adults, but kids need to be protected from being put into boxes.
In this book, Unbox Your Life, he's talking about the main thing that separates successful people from unsuccessful people. Successful people do not surround themselves or eliminate people who constantly complain about anything, who is constantly bringing them down, versus surround yourself with the people that empowers you. And that made me think about how to make sure that our kids will surround themselves with the kids that will share ideas versus kids that will share like what's wrong in their lives.
Interesting that he just says like to about emotional vampires, right, or energy vampires, like to get rid of them. That's key. I think it was Dr. Orloff was her name in her book Emotional Freedom, where she kind of like she gives you tools how to turn people around or turn yourself around from an energy vampire. But at the end, like if nothing works, then yeah. The last final result or tool is cut them out.
But it's also like you have only one life and you want to create things. And those people, unfortunately, they bring you down. They definitely do. And
it's also up to you if you let them. There's a huge thing about that. If you ask Sanguru about this, he would laugh at you. He's like, nobody can bring me down, honey. I'm such a light being, you know, I'm pure energy and happiness. You can't bring me down. You can't suck my energy out. I'm pure energy. So again, like it really depends on who you speak to. And you should know that as a yogi, you know, somebody who meditates all the time and practices yoga for years.
But surrounding kids from early age with the kids that also creative in terms of like they sharing ideas and what can we do, how we can solve this problem, or what can we actually do about this problem, is powerful. It's like going to a synthesis school where same-minded kids is different from going to like any public school, for example.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you'll take a look, like I don't remember Skylar having a lot of friends at school simply because they don't share the same interests. They simply forced to be like make connections with the people they have nothing to talk about. Like I do remember he brought from school, it's like talking about Roblox. I'm like, Skylar, but don't you want to like create games on Roblox instead of like being used? And that's how we started coding and stuff like that. So it helps.
I know, and then it's interesting that you mentioned it because that coding part brought the whole thing where when he started his entrepreneurship journey, he he right away was very interested in all these subscription models of like, oh, getting every 30 days something, we can sell something like that. And the way he thinks right away from the entrepreneurial thing, that's not a huge thing of unboxing kids. It's taking them on the journeys that kind of require that way of thinking. Thinking outside the box in order to solve an entrepreneurial dilemma, that empowers them to think like that in other areas and kind of transfers that. You can't be an entrepreneur and thinking boxed in. That doesn't work that way because you're going to be competing with people who think outside the box and you're never going to win.
And from parent perspective also, for example, when he's asking to watch something like a cartoon or something, he started to watch Shark Tank.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, he loved it so much, especially if you look into episodes where kids come to sharks. It's freaking amazing.
There was one episode. There was one episode there with this one kid who came in with his dad, and he was just dropping terms like, I think he was 11, but he was dropping terms like distribution, no, not even, something way, way more sophisticated than that. That these guys were like, how does this kid even know these terms?
Mm-hmm.
And Sky loves that episode. He watches this kid, he's like, wow, okay. Let's see. To me, this is like the fourth minute mile. The 4 minute mile was like what, last century, until the guy in the 50s, right? He broke the mile in 4 minutes. Up until that moment, everybody thought this was physically impossible, that a human heart cannot even withstand something like that. So nobody ever did it. And the second he did it, that same year or the next few years, like a bunch of people did it because now they knew that it's possible. Right? The same thing, I think, when Sky is watching these Shark Tank shows, he sees all these ideas that come together, and he's realizing, wow, this is all possible. All these people that come there, especially some of them with such brilliant ideas, such amazing, such kids with amazing ideas.
And some ideas are very simple. And he realized, well, it's like there is nothing sophisticated or extraordinary. It's just the kid came up with a solution to a problem, and it's a huge success.
Yeah, and then sometimes you can create something that resonates with people so well. That episode, do you remember that episode when these couple of teenagers, they came up with a cap on cocktail drinks to protect a girl's drinks from being spiked when she goes on dates?
No, I never did.
Yeah, that was a crazy good episode. And Lori was so much enthusiastic by this idea because she's like, it really resonated with her because it's a real problem out there that girls getting spiked and they're getting drugged and getting date raped and whatnot. And Mark Cuban was like, that's a phenomenal solution. And these guys were so creative with it. And the fact that they even filed a utility patent on this thing, because Mr. Wonderful was like, oh, you can't protect this. And they're like, no, we actually have a utility patent. And Cuban was like, what kind of patent? And they told him like some kind of drink spiking protection device. He's like, wow, that's brilliant. That's genius.
I love that.
So they even patented just a regular idea of like putting a cap on a liquor drink, on a alcohol drink. And they're crushing it right now. And they got in bed, obviously, with such amazing entrepreneurs that run like Shark Tanks are, So very simple idea, amazingly simple idea. But it was based on the problem. They saw a real problem, and the solution was simple, and that's why it resonated. And that's what like thinking outside the box kind of delivers. Amazing solutions. And yeah, the kids get inspired by watching that show.
Yep.
And that's another thing. Like pick right now, the choices are there to actually, if your kids do watch TV sometimes, you can put some amazing stuff in front of them. They don't have to get dumbed down.
It's all about the choice you make.
As a parent, and then the kids just follow.
Yep.
The kids just follow. Well, that was a phenomenal podcast, babe. I love this topic. I think we should talk more about this.
Let's do that.
I want to talk more about critical thinking in general, but this was amazing. Thanks for bringing this up, and thank you guys for listening.